Good morning, everybody. This is Zach at it again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and today we are celebrating a special, momentous moment in my career in that we are celebrating my 900th consecutive column of Strictly Observing. And to celebrate, we have a very special guest with us, the former Chief of Staff, former Governor of Virginia, Tim Kaine. We have Mr. Bill Leighty with us. Thank you so much, Bill, for being with me this morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Zach. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Well, the reason I have you here is because I wanted to do something special to commemorate the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, which occurred on September 8th, and wanted to acknowledge especially her visit to Virginia, which I think was pretty momentous for us and also for her, in that it was her last visit to the United States. Now, you have worked under many governors, as I understand, from Governor Wilder to Governor Gilmore, and Governor Warner, and then Governor Kaine. So you probably had the opportunity to meet lots of heads of state. So where did meeting Queen Elizabeth, where did that rank for you?
Zach, I would have to say that was the clearly the most significant meeting in my career.
And your career spans how many years of working for governors in Virginia?
38 years in Virginia. I worked with or for 12 governors, 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats.
Fantastic. And were you chief of staff for all of those, or just?
No, just Warner and Kaine.
All right. Everybody wants to, Queen Elizabeth is somewhat, and correct me if you disagree, but I would say Queen Elizabeth is somewhat of an enigma, a figure that everybody wants to get to know, but nobody really knows. So with your opportunity to meet and speak with her, what was your impression of her in general?
I had the opportunity to have actually a 5-minute private audience with Queen Elizabeth, Her Majesty, and it was quite delightful. She is very personable. She is very skilled at making conversation with little people like me, and she had all the right questions there at her fingertips to ask me, to make me feel comfortable and to interact with me. It was a delightful 5 minutes.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if I were to have an opportunity to meet Her Majesty, the thing that I would be most concerned about is breaking protocol. And you admit very candidly that in the chapter of your forthcoming book that you sent me, that you did in fact break protocol with Her Majesty.
Yes, Zach, I was scared to death. I walked in the room, I stopped 5 feet in front of her as instructed, and I went to bow, and instead I curtsied. And she began laughing, and she said, "Young man," of course to her I was a young man, "young man, wars have been fought over less. Why do you Americans even bother?" And then she began asking me a series of questions about my role with her trip to the United States and to Jamestown for the 400th anniversary. Made me feel very comfortable.
And your role indeed was a significant one, because you submitted the official itinerary for the trip. You had many go-betweens between you and Buckingham Palace and the officials there. And what struck me in the chapter of the book that you sent was that this was a this was an event, a visit that was going to take place. You had been planning this for years and years.
Well, I had not. There was the state of Virginia was through the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and there were a number of also, because it was the 400th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown, there were a number of other organizations, both here and in England, that had been formed to commemorate that special moment. I came into it much later, and merely by accident. I just happened to be chief of staff when the British Embassy called to inform the governor that it would be, the Queen would indeed be coming, and to give us official notification. And in that conversation, Zach, the head of protocol for the British Embassy said, "So who will your chief protocol officer be for this visit?" And not knowing anything about such things, I just said, "I am." And so I ended up having a very large role in her visit, only because of my ignorance of facts.
Which you sort of involuntarily elected yourself as the protocol officer, right?
Yes, yes.
And that it was a very, very interesting chapter, and you came up with some very interesting things for her to do, including participating in an archaeological dig. Can you talk about how you decided upon some of those things?
Well, we knew that she was deeply interested in the work of Bill Kelso, who is the preeminent archaeologist at Jamestown Island, and somehow or another we knew that she was very, very interested in that. And in order to entice her to do some of the other things on the agenda that we had proposed, we proposed that if she was willing to start by the Archaearium, for example, just steps away, we could get her into one of the digs with Bill Kelso. And she was very keen on meeting Bill Kelso, so she jumped right at that one.
Excellent. What a big honor that must have been for Bill Kelso.
Yeah, well, the one thing, Zach, that I had suggested that she do that they turned down was the week of her visit was to be followed by the Richmond NASCAR race, and I suggested that she stay over and go out and greet the 110,000 NASCAR fans and say, "Gentlemen, stolci luchikohos." But they turned us down for that one, and she went to the Kentucky Derby instead.
Yeah, because she is, as most know, a very avid horsewoman. And I thought that you had a pretty. I thought it was a pretty interesting interaction that you had when the vice president of the United States, Dick Cheney at the time, wanted to be involved, and he sent his people down, and there was an interesting interaction there.
Well, he sent his people down, and they came in the room unannounced. They hadn't been invited as we were planning the luncheon for the Queen, and they immediately started trying to take over the meeting. And I politely reminded them that the host for the luncheon would be the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation and the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that if they really wanted to have a role in what happened at the luncheon, then they needed to agree to be a co-sponsor of the luncheon. And I threw out the number of $100,000 and asked them if they were prepared to do that. And they said no, and so I invited them to leave the meeting.
And they went away quickly.
Yeah, they did.
But the vice president was at the luncheon, correct?
He was indeed. He sat next to the Queen.
All right. But they didn't want to help with that bill of $100,000.
No.
So
I was just trying to cut through the red tape and get things done as quickly as possible, and I didn't want necessarily to have the vice president's office to coordinate. I was already coordinating with the British Embassy, Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, and William and Mary, and Jamestown Yorktown. I didn't want yet another entity involved in the coordination. So I scared him off by throwing a number at him.
You were talking about the steps. You were worried about the steps at the Capitol. And then there was a remark about Her Majesty's legs, I believe.
Well, I was very concerned about the route where the Queen was going to take, walking from the mansion up the steps of the front of the Capitol into the General Assembly building, or into the General Assembly legislative chambers. And I remarked maybe one time too many that I was worried about her walking up the steps. And the deputy head of household for Buckingham Palace said, enough with worried about the steps. The Queen's got good legs. And I said, oh, yes, she does. And apparently that was not what something a protocol officer should say.
It didn't go over too well.
Didn't go over very well, no.
The British officials. Well, I thought it was quite funny myself. And then, indeed, of course, something happened in our area that none of us were prepared for just a few weeks earlier, and that was the Virginia Tech tragedy.
Yes.
So that element had to be worked in. Or, well, it didn't have to be, but was it it was Buckingham Palace, am I correct? You said, would it be appropriate if Her Majesty met with some of the victims' families? Well,
yes, obviously, Zach, and still get emotional when we talk about tech, but
sure.
In the middle of, obviously, all of the planning we were doing for the Queen's visit, the tragedy at Virginia Tech happened. And, of course, that was instantly a worldwide event.
Mm-hmm.
And so Buckingham Palace did contact me and ask whether she should still come or not. And I said that was such a decision that I could not opine on that. She needed to make her own decision, but that she would always be welcome. The reply was that she would come, and she asked if it would be appropriate for her to meet with some of the victims' families and some of the students who had actually been shot, who at that point were starting to recover.
Mm-hmm.
And so a very private audience with the Queen was set up so that immediately upon her addressing the joint session of the Virginia General Assembly, and on her way out of the Virginia Capitol, Mr. Jefferson's Temple on the Hill, she stopped by one of the committee rooms where the families who had readily agreed to meet with her were assembled, and she and Prince Philip spent a good amount of time talking with the families.
Which I think was a very kind gesture. I'm sure that it, aided in the unimaginable grieving of those families that I cannot imagine, the tragedy they endured. I was not connected to anyone personally that was involved with the shooting, but Dr. G.V. Lognathan was a pioneer in studies of cerebral palsy, and I myself have been born with cerebral palsy and been bound to a wheelchair all my life, and became aware after his passing of the great strides he'd made in deciphering cerebral palsy and things that he had come up with to aid victims of that disease. So that name will always forever be in my mind.
Yes,
for that reason.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's important for people to know.
When the Queen was in Virginia, everybody wanted to see her, everybody wanted a glimpse of her, to wave to her, and there were lots of children there to present her flowers. And I love the story that you told of one little girl who had forgotten, or had been looked over, or some way didn't get to give her flowers to the Queen, and the Duke of Edinburgh stepped in.
Yes, Zach, it was very touching, and it just shows, in my opinion, the magnitude of the man of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. As the Queen was progressing along the rope line from the governor's mansion to the Capitol, people were, of course, wanting to greet her and hand her flowers, and she was, of course, had to move pretty briskly in order to keep pace with the events of the day. And she passed by a little girl who failed to notice the Queen coming and didn't get a chance to give the Queen her flowers. And the Queen quickly moved by, but Prince Philip, following the Queen, saw the little girl's reaction when she missed the opportunity to give the Queen the flowers, and he must have been, at the time, I'm sure he was in his late 80s, perhaps even early 90s. He saw the reaction of the little girl, and he reached over the rope line, and he picked the girl up and carried her and her flowers to the Queen so that she could give her flowers to the Queen. And that was just such a very special moment for all involved.
And you know that's something that's been 15 years now, and you know that's something that little girl will remember and cherish the rest of her life.
And tell her grandchildren probably.
Absolutely. What a special moment indeed, and I'm grateful to you for including that in your book. And she had apparently was very impressed by Governor Kaine, who is now Senator Kaine. You see pictures of them smiling and laughing together as you look through photos of her visit, but she was apparently particularly impressed by the governor.
She was indeed. In fact, years later, I got a call from the ambassador who had been in England, the U.S. ambassador, to the British ambassador to the U.S., who had been in a meeting with the Queen recently, and she had a private message to pass along to, that she wanted the ambassador to pass along to Tim Kaine, which was that in her many years of service, and she had met many public officials during those years, that she had never met a man who was as comfortable with himself as Tim Kaine was in his own skin and in his role as a politician.
And I'm sure that sent Governor Kaine into the stratosphere to hear that message.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Because she doesn't appear to be a person who handed out compliments freely. So to receive something, and this was years later, you say?
Well, it was not too many years later because I was still there as chief of staff, so that would have probably been maybe a year later.
Wow. And when was your departure from that position?
I left in September of 2007.
Did you retire from there, or where did you go
indeed.
from there? Okay, good for you. And you must have had a very illustrious career along the way.
I had a wonderful career, had a wonderful opportunity to meet a number of people, but the Queen was certainly my highlight.
And where are you from originally?
Wow, that is a really tough question, Zach. I was born in Stuttgart, Germany, son of a military family, and so I traveled all over the United States, but my dad was stationed in Virginia 7 times, so I always called Virginia home.
Indeed. And sounds like Virginia was very lucky to have you as well. So,
well, I'm certainly in love with Virginia, yes.
Well, I am a lifelong citizen of Whiteville. Have you ever been to Whiteville?
I have, and I remember fondly Archie Campbell, a name from Whiteville you might not know, but he was chairman of House Finance when I first started my career. Okay. Well, I don't recall that immediately, but I'm sure a lot of people will. That name, Campbell's still a very prominent name in Whiteville.
And of course, we have a wonderful connection in Miss Linda Diorio, who is my wonderful friend who connected me to you. A fabulous lady.
I've worked with Linda a very long time.
Yes.
And her wonderful boss, Rick Boucher, who I worked with from the time he was a state senator.
Well, a wonderful lady she is indeed. And now let's talk briefly about this book. I was fortunate enough to get a whole chapter of it, but when can we expect a full release of this book?
Well, Zach, thank you for asking. It's at the publisher, and we're looking at availability sometime after the first of the year, and it will be available in many formats. But look for a formal book announcement sometime after the first of the year.
Do you have a title yet?
It's called Capitol Secrets: An Insider's View of a Life of Public Service.
Wonderful. And if you would send me a copy of it when it comes out, I'd love to do a review for you, and maybe we can talk again after the first of the year if you're interested.
Love to do that, Zach.
Great. All right. Is there anything that I did not cover with Her Majesty's visit that you would like to discuss?
No, I think that covers it very well.
All right. I'm very honored to speak with you on this and get to commemorate my 900th column in this way. This means
wow! Congratulations!
Thank you. This means a great deal to me. I've written in the Whitfield Enterprise every Wednesday for the last 17 and a half years. I've never missed one, and I get a whole $12 a week for what I do.
Oh boy!
So this is a great honor to get to talk with you, and appreciate your time, and look forward to reading the book in full when it comes out.
All right, thank you, Zach.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.